10 o'clock on your Thursday morning. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell will be along with me in just a moment. Going to dive back into men's basketball. Of course, last night falling to the number 5 Florida Gators, 70-69 in a game that South Carolina did not trail in until the final 5 seconds. Of course, that loss drops them now to 0-6 in conference play. Is the brutal season that has unfolded up to this point just seems to never have an end. A brutal season in conference play, at least. Non-conference wasn't all that bad, but they can't seem to find a win in conference play to save their life. And then last night was obviously no exception. And that's the frustrating thing about getting invested, right? Like as a fan base, as a whole, when you know your team has the capability to play a number 2 Auburn team, to play a number 5 Florida team down to the very wire. Again, they were in position to win both of those games, and your fundamentals failed you in both of those instances. Obviously, free throws killed you against Auburn, and a combination of turnovers and free throws killed you against Florida. More the turnovers, but free throws obviously ended up being a big deal there at the very end with Zach Davis having the opportunity to go up by 2 when he was at the line and only making 1 of those, which again has been a consistent problem with this team throughout this entire season. And you just walk away feeling so deflated, right? Like you're because here's the thing, within the bubble of what this season is, right? We knew going into last night's game the chances of South Carolina making the tournament were pretty minuscule. The chance of them running the table and winning the SEC or putting up a good fight in the tournament in Nashville, probably pretty low as well. But within the context of last night, for one night, one game, even if it was the only win you had in the entire conference slate, you could have enjoyed the fact that your team defeated a top 5 opponent. And again, I maybe I shouldn't have been this overconfident, but in the second half, as Carolina's controlling this game, got up to a 14-point lead with about 12 minutes to go. At one point, I was thinking, I don't remember the exact time left in the game when I was thinking this, but I was legitimately thinking to myself, like, wow, we might actually see a court storming tonight if things continue to go the way they go. And again, I know I should have thought that because, again, it ended up going sideways and Carolina fell apart there down the stretch. But even if you won that game last night with how rough this conference slate's been, and even if the rest of the conference slate is not great, you could have still been able to say, man, we still beat a number 5 team in our house, stormed the court, all those kind of things. But you didn't even get that because once again, the basics and the fundamentals just fell apart in those final 9 minutes, and Carolina is once again heartbroken now, sitting at 0-6 in conference play.
What's up, Tyler?
What's happening?
Man, I feel bad. I feel bad for these guys. I feel bad for the students. I feel bad for the fans because, if this Carolina team was just bad, and I know what the record says, but if they were just bad and you were just getting blown out every week, you'd be like, wait, they're just not good. And then a lot of people, just tune out, so you don't have to kind of take it.
Yeah.
I feel like this is way worse, for the fans, you're in, you have to have some level of talent and ability.
Sure.
Because you're in these, not only you're in these games, you are in some facets controlling these games at times.
Yep.
And I don't know about you watching the game though, man, but I felt like I was just watching a slow motion, just like you were kind of watching with about 10 minutes left in the second half. And you kind of just saw the turnovers start to mount again. Florida goes into their press, and you're kind of watching the lead just kind of tick away. And I'm not one of those people that says, oh, here we go again. Like, they're definitely going to blow this thing, because I always believe in sports, like, this could be the day that you say, no, this is the end of it. We're going to step up.
Sure.
And stop this from happening. That can always happen. But as it turns out, this was far too of a familiar feeling for South Carolina. And this was the worst one. in my opinion, by far. Like, I know some of these other tight losses where you've had leads have been difficult, but this one just, to me, in terms of taking it out of the fans and taking it out of the players, just the punch to the gut, so to speak, this one to me was by far the worst, because I honestly felt like there were a couple moments there where you felt like Carolina could actually just run away with the game.
Sure.
And I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Tough.
And look, you had a good crowd of students there, the blackout, like everybody, the energy was good. It seemed like a pretty rowdy environment. And again, it's kind of same thing with the Auburn game a couple weeks ago. You played your style of basketball against a top 5 team. You held a Florida team that was averaging 85 points a game to 70 points. Like, you defensively, you did what you were supposed to do. But man, those final 9 minutes, and I'll bring up the stat again, they had a 13-point lead with 8:49 to go. They got outscored down the stretch 25-11 to obviously lose by 1 point. 9 turnovers in 9 minutes, 5 of which came from Zach Davis. Like, it just all, and again, Zach Davis was setting himself up to be the hero of this game because he was making shots and doing all these great things in the first 30-ish minutes, and then it just all came apart in those last 9 to 10.
Yeah, and the turnovers just at this point are incredibly hard, I think, to stomach, because, again, if you just were unable to score the basketball, or you're unable to defend, or you're unable to shoot, or you're just too small, or you're just too slow, or if it's any of these sort of just talent issues, then and that's one thing. You say you're just not good enough, but I think it's hard to figure out exactly how to even frame up what is happening, because you would think this is something that they would ultimately be able to cut down on, as much as I'm sure they have emphasized it in practice to this point. And so I don't know how you fix it. I don't know what the deal is. This is not the year in the SEC that you want to sort of have these type of games, because this conference will just chew you up and spit you out, as we've seen. This is not a bad basketball team. Like, I know people like to say this. No, this is not a bad basketball team. This is a basketball team that has struggled to find ways to win, even though they have been. I mean, this team could be sitting at 500. Sure. They're not. I'm not doing the ifs, whats, buts, all that. I'm just saying, just from how the games have played out, you could be sitting there at 500 in SEC play right now. And to me, it's become a highly mental thing. Like, I don't know. I was watching at home, but it just felt like as the game got tighter and as the game got later, there was some just timidness. I feel like just some you needed multiple. And I know CMB is always going to say, hey, give me the ball, but you needed a little bit from everybody. You needed a little bit more.
Sure.
Just we're going to go win this game, and if it's me to make the shot, I'm going to do it. If it's you to, a little bit, it just felt passive as the game went on. There was an opportunity. There was a rebound at one point where a guard has the ball already inside the paint. The game is tied, and it gets dribbled out like if you still had the lead, as opposed to just going back up towards the basket. Even the final shot, man, I don't feel like you have to launch that ball from there. Keep going to the basket. Like, it feels like Carolina has gotten sped up when the game has been on the line, and your mind's going a million miles an hour, and it's just, I don't know, man. It's frustrating, I'm sure, for a lot of listeners and viewers and all that, because you're right there. The students showed up. I was frankly a little bit like, is this going to be a poorer crowd considering the season, the weather, how everything's played out? They had to lean heavily in on the students, but the students stepped up, man. Like, the students were there. It was a good atmosphere, and I think they fed off the team. The team fed off them. CMB was unstoppable.
Oh, he came out of the gate on fire. He got 5 points in the first 5 seconds, it felt like. Like, man, it's going to be one of those nights where he just goes and has career highs and a respectable night, 14 points. And he was dishing assists last night, which was cool to see this, helping other guys score. And Carolina, the assist to buckets made ratio, 18 assists to 28 made buckets. That's phenomenal. But again, it's the other things on the other end. When it comes to turnovers, it just kills you.
Yeah, and I don't know. We need a basketball expert on here. The turnovers I fail to even put into work. To me, it's on both ends, and what I mean by that is a lot of times you say, all right, what happened on this particular turnover? And it's, all right, the passer needs to be a little bit more forceful, appears to be a huge rebound, and then Florida guy just comes up behind you and pokes the ball away, and it leads to a basket. Just it can't happen.
Yeah, no, it's frustrating to be having the same conversation over and over again, and now sitting at 0-6 in conference play, not really knowing what the rest of the season has in store for you and what you're really playing for. And we'll get a little bit of what Coach Paris had to say after the game coming up next, because that is a question of, okay, what do you do now that you still got 12 more games to go? And guess what? It's not going to get easier. Here comes Mississippi State on Saturday, a team that drug you by 35 points in their house just a couple weeks ago. How are you going to match up with them? I tend to believe that with what we've seen at home games so far, you probably got a chance of making a good game out of it. But again, it's like, okay, what's going to go wrong? What fundamental mistakes you're going to make, whether it be turnovers or free throws, which again, Zach Davis had a chance to make it a 2-point game there at the end and made one of two free throws that obviously helped set Florida up to win the game. So what kind of things are going to go wrong on Saturday where you lose to Mississippi State? I hate to be negative, but that's kind of where we're at with this team when it comes to, okay, what happens now?
Yeah, and I think most people are going to feel that way, Tyler, until they see otherwise, and you can always turn it around. That's the beauty of sports. What happened last week does not necessarily guarantee what's going to happen this week or next week or any of that. But ultimately, when people see trends, and a lot of this is a trend at this point, they that's what they're going to expect. And now at this point, I mean, you've dug such a hole. I know early on when they started 0-2 in SEC play, you were kind of going, well, they only have to get to 500 in SEC play. If you had beaten Auburn, great opportunity there, then you're just going, maybe you can go on a run here. At this point, I mean, I hate to say it, but you're just playing for pride at this point and trying to get things turned back in the right direction.
We'll hear a little bit from Coach Paris and what he had to say after the game coming up next. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler and Wes on your Thursday here in the game. welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler and Wes along with you here on your Thursday on the game. Mind you once again that next week we'll be back out at Pro Swing as they'll be hosting their first annual Pro Swing Golf Classic, January 30th through February the 1st. If you want to take part in it, it's $150 to register. For a two-person team, bookings are available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Food is included. You can win $1,000 for first place, $750 for second place, $500 for third, and we'll be drawing Gamecock baseball season tickets just for registering. Give Pro Swing a call if you want to sign up at 803-528-1617. That's 803-528-1617. Sign up for the annual Pro Swing Golf Classic, first annual Pro Swing Golf Classic. Getting back into men's basketball from last night, Coach Paris talking after the game was posed the question of, well, what now with this team that is now 0-6 in conference play?
You still lose, and there's nothing to do except for play. Sure. And that's it. You got to find it. I have to find it. I'm constantly looking into the rotations. I'm in there in the locker room after this talking about what could I have done. Could I have had, one of our stronger guys bring the ball up like Colin, but he is high in turnovers for us. I don't know if that makes sense, but against his own man, maybe it would have made some sense. I don't know. You got to pick yourself up, and you got to get to the next thing, right? I'm not going to stop coaching. We're not going to stop doing our thing, and they got to play. The games aren't going to stop coming. You have to play, and you have to get with your basketball gods. I say this all the time, your own personal individual basketball god, and make it right with him so that when it comes down to your abilities, you have true confidence in those things, right? It's one thing, this guy banked a shot in and that's how we lost. The ref made a terrible call and that's how we lost. When it comes down to your abilities, your ability to pass to a teammate, your ability to make a free throw late in the game, your ability, that's where your confidence in your heart of hearts is going to be shaken when you don't perform. And so I think there's some real challenges for some of these guys to have to search inward and look inward to find the true confidence that they need to continue to move forward.
And that's what's so frustrating about watching a game like last night, where you can watch them for the first half and roughly the first 30-ish minutes play very effective, good, fundamentally sound basketball. It took them like 11 minutes to commit their first turnover. And compared to what they've done the past couple weeks, that's amazing. And then you have 9 of them in the final 9 minutes of the game. And, yes, the pressure is on a little bit more in the last half of those games, but they've shown you the ability to do the right things and make the right decisions and play the game the right way. It's just when the heat starts to turn up, this team just doesn't know what to do for some reason.
Yeah, and I think interesting comments there from Paris. And for one, he's right. What do you do from here? Well, hey, you have the rest of the season. You don't get to just quit now. Not that you'd want to. So you've got to go try to find something to play for and finish the year on a high note if you can. And if you're the guys kind of looking in the mirror here, I thought without getting into specifics about particular players, he sort of told us, like, hey, there's maybe some deep down confidence issues when the game is on the line. Like, it's one thing to play a certain way when it's a little bit more loose. It's a little bit more, when the game is on the line, then that is when all the little details, all the little small things can become big things. And for Carolina, you could feel everything tighten up as the score got tighter and as the game got later. And you were just wondering, are they just didn't look as fluid. Yeah. They didn't look as confident. The offense, I thought, lost some of its structure that we saw early on. And it just they looked like a different team at those times, and it almost kind of felt like they were trying to hold on for the win as opposed to continuing to be aggressive, which being aggressive was what got them there in the first place. I do think we've seen what this team can do for a good portion of that game when they also are not in foul trouble. Mm-hmm. That's been something at times, like when Pringle and CMB are in foul trouble, which we saw, at Oklahoma, and they don't even have the option to put them both on the floor at the same time. The lack of depth right now, and to be honest, it is sort of at least exasperated by the injuries, when they have foul trouble, they're in really bad shape. And so you didn't have that last night. But I also believe, tell me what you think, Tyler. I think some of the lack of depth on this team right now, especially with the injuries, I wonder how much that plays into some end of game scenarios as well. Because as we know, this is a program where you have to play defense. It's exhausting on your body to play defense. So you're asking these guys, and again, I'm not saying I'm against it, but I just wonder if the lack of depth sort of stacks up as a game progresses, because it seemed like they had to go to a pretty short lineup in terms of the guys that were on the floor last night, just because there's only so many guys right now you trust to go make plays. You add in the fact that Cam Scott is now, dealing, I think, with an illness as well. And so even just how you structure the minutes that you're giving guys is a little bit different than what it would be in a perfect world.
And we know this is a defensive-minded type of team. They like to play slow, like told you, to limited possessions. So being on the court for Coach Paris requires playing really good defense, which Zach Davis is a pretty good defensive player, which is why he's out there in the starting lineup. And what we've seen out of him from a scoring standpoint at times this year, especially last night, is just a bonus in addition to what he gives you on defense. So I've seen people this morning say, well, why aren't you benching guys like that? Why aren't you benching Jacoby Wright? Do you have an option on the bench that's going to be better than those guys? Probably not. And I know you can have guys that can come in and play good at times for limited minutes, but when you're asking them to go out there for 25, 30, 35 minutes, I don't know if you're going to get that same kind of results than what the guys that you have out there right now.
Well, that's who else is going to play point guard?
I don't know.
It's rhetorical question. There is no one else, So,
and again, Jamari Thomas is your best option.
And he's hurt. Yeah.
And he's hurt. And again, we've had the conversation. He's not Talon Cooper, but still, he was your best option. He was the starter for a reason. And I know they're talking about maybe getting him back as soon as next week. But again, you've felt him not being out there these past couple of weeks.
Yeah, you really have. And Jamari obviously has had some of his own turnover issues, but there was a reason he was a starter. Who knows? Maybe he'd be working through some of those things. And it just, if he's there, it gives you a little bit more of a cushion. If he's having a good day, then you lean on him. If he's having an off day, you at least have some other options. And again, you can't just ask one guy to be the point guard for the entire game.
Yeah.
So with really no other true point guard options, I think it hurts itself with your starting lineup, but it really starts to show as the game progresses when you're trying to get guys, a rest here or there, and you have backup guys on the floor. Tell you what, I know his shot wasn't necessarily falling a few times last night, but I still really like Arden Conyers. Like that's a guy.
Like promise.
Like you have some young talent on this team, but obviously you can see if you start going globally, big picture, it's going to be a very important offseason for them in terms of adding some guys.
We'll talk plenty more about basketball as the day rolls along. Get Chris's thoughts when he gets in here at 11 o'clock. Switching over to football coming up next. Last night they handed out the Bear Bryant Coach of the Year Award. Who took it home? We'll tell you about that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating on your Thursday here on The Game.
All right, folks, this episode and all the episodes of the Gamecock Club Hour brought to you by our friends over at Krantz Cooling and Heating. That's Krantz with a K, Cooling with a K. Head on over to KrantzCooling.com or give them a call, 803-672-3224. Obviously, incredibly cold out there, so hopefully you're not dealing with any issues with your heat. But if you are, or maybe you're just noticing your heat is struggling to keep up right now, and maybe it's time for a new unit or just for some preventative maintenance. Let them come out and take a look at what's going on there, see if maybe you need to upgrade, make a couple of changes, and just see what's going on. Again, 803-672-3224. 3224. They also have these great plans that you can get on, a maintenance plan to where they're going to come out and make sure you're taken care of every single moment, whether we're talking about the cold we're dealing with right now or that famous Columbia heat. Again, that's our friends over at Krantz Cooling. Hit them up, krantzcooling.com.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler Ed and Wes Mitchell along with you on your Thursday. Coming up today from 3 until 6, the post-game road show with Schroeder's Towing is going to be at Craft and Draft, 7583 St. Andrews Road out in Irmo. Going to go by and see Jay and Elijah today from 3 until 6. And then after that, at 6 o'clock, Coach Paris will be on Carolina Calls here on the game in Columbia, as well as 100.3 the game out in Myrtle Beach. As, of course, he continues to assess what happened last night and turns his attention to the rematch with Mississippi State coming up on Saturday at Colonial Life Arena. Last night out in Houston, the Bear Bryant Coach of the Year Award was handed out. It did go to Marcus Freeman, of course, on the heels of taking his team all the way to the national championship game. But it was a list of finalists that included Coach Beamer, Kurt Signetti, Spencer Danielson, Kenny Dillingham, Rhett Lashley, Jeff Munkin, and Steve Sarkisian from Texas. Of course, it's a bummer that Coach Beamer didn't win, but just to even be talked about in the same way as these other coaches, many of which were in the college football playoff, again, speaks volumes to what was a very successful and a positive year for Coach Beamer's team.
Yeah, for sure. And certainly, you can't really go against the idea of Freeman getting it. The job he did with Notre Dame was fantastic. But for Beamer, like you said, to be in that group, to be invited out there, some of the who's who, and just I'm sure, and I was listening to some of Beamer's comments out there, to be out there for something like this, knowing some of the same accolades that his dad got over the years had to be pretty special. And I think when you are recognized like that by the national media and by your peers and stuff like that, it just speaks to the job you are doing. And it is very easy for us to get caught up in our bubble and, for fans to get frustrated about, this or that. And I get it. And I'm not saying you can't or shouldn't be frustrated. But from a big picture standpoint, this is now a program that has actually 3 out of the 4 years that Beamer has been in Columbia outplayed what most just sort of your random person's expectations were for the season. Obviously, the 5-7 year is the outlier there, but the other 3 seasons, Carolina has done way more than most people expected them to, and that's I think speaks to not just Beamer but to the whole staff here and what they've done. And now we'll see if they can take what they've done and then take it to another level.
It's interesting. You mentioned his dad there, and Coach Beamer did talk about that a little bit while he was out at this event yesterday. And his dad did win this award back in 1999, the year that obviously Virginia Tech played Florida State for the national championship. It's interesting because when you're the son of a legendary coach, you're going to kind of be in that shadow under that umbrella for a very long time. And look, Coach Beamer, Shane has not accomplished nearly what his father did in his long, illustrious career at, Virginia Tech and all that. But I really do feel like as we get set for year number 5 under Coach Beamer, he has become his own coach, right? He's not looked at as, hey, that's Frank Beamer's son. No, he's Shane Beamer. He is Coach Beamer. When people say Coach Beamer, he's the person you think of as of right now. And that's a hard thing to do because there's a lot of sons of legendary coaches that can never quite escape that shadow. And again, we still want them to accomplish more things and get the team in the playoff, make runs at national championships and SEC titles and all those kind of things. But I think he has successfully, to this point, navigated himself out of his father's shadow.
Yeah, for sure. And, he has his own personality, his own coaching style. And in a lot of ways, that coaching style is, I would say, a good bit different than what his dad's was, at least in terms of, how he carries himself. Now, the foundation and a lot of the things that he believes are important to winning and locker room culture and taking care of your teammates and things like that are actually very much old school and probably are foundations that he did learn from his dad. But the one thing you always hear about successful coaches is the ones that are truly able to connect with not just young people, connect with anyone, are the ones who are just themselves. And the moment you try to be, someone else, even if it is your dad, then it's not going to, for one, it's not going to come across as being genuine. For two, it's just not going to be successful over time. So I think for Shane Beamer, you have people, honestly, that from the very beginning have tried to say, you weren't ready for this job or you weren't cut out for it at that point because you hadn't been a head coach before. So he has proved a lot of people wrong. And to his credit, he has done it his way as opposed to it being, even his dad's way or Spurrier's way or anyone else that he's been under as a coach.
Let's dial back the clock to 2020 and when he was hired as the head coach here after, Muschamp was let go. And you mentioned he'd never been a proper offensive or defensive coordinator up to that point, certainly never been a head coach before. What was kind of the overall perception from the fan base, your subscribers, all that kind of stuff on, hey, here we're hiring a guy that doesn't quite fit the mold of what a typical first-time head coach, as far as resume, typically is?
Yeah, and everybody has their opinion, so I don't want to paint a broad brush about what everybody was thinking. I tell you, it really seemed to shift incredibly in a more positive direction after his first press conference. I think there was a little bit overall of people just sort of maybe not necessarily questioning the hire, but just saying, all right, what's the thought process here? What's the thinking? What are they thinking in terms of making this move? Then after the first press conference, and he kind of laid out his plans, and you saw how detail-oriented he was. You saw how much he cared about the place. You saw how much it mattered to him. It was overwhelmingly positive at that point. Now, I will say this, but because of those little questions from people at the very beginning about, well, he hasn't been a head coach. When Carolina gets off to a slow start, year one, that does, you don't quite have the built-up cushion for people where, like, when you hired Steve Spurrier, well, hey, the team's not performing that well yet. Hey, it's Steve Spurrier. We know what this guy can do. So I do think that's something that Shane Beamer had to fight from the very beginning, was the moment people saw that, hey, this team has these issues, you have people ready to pounce because they're saying, I told you so. You can't go hire a guy in the SEC who's not been a coach before. But I think what we see is, for one, it's incredibly hard to know ahead of time which coach is going to be successful and which one is not. Like, how many coaching hires have you seen where on paper you're like, they made the perfect hire, and then it does not play out remotely the way you think it will?
Yep.
One of my biggest ones, Scott Frost in Nebraska.
Seemed like a match made in heaven.
I was like, I was like, credit to them for not overthinking this, just doing what appeared to be the quite obvious answer.
The prodigal son returning home.
Didn't work at all. So ultimately, if you can coach, you can coach. But it's hard to, like, it's really hard to know, all right, did this guy you're bringing in, was he just, I don't want to say lucky, because if you make it to this level, all these guys are talented. All these guys can coach. But did you, if you judge a guy on one season as a head coach, and did it just all come together for that one season, and we sort of paint you into being a great head coach, and then you get hired somewhere else and it doesn't work out. So, I mean, there's been lots of hires where you say that's a perfect hire and it doesn't work out. So I think we have to remember the opposite of that as well. When there's a hire maybe where you go, hey, what are they really thinking here? That doesn't mean it's not going to work out.
Was there a narrative around the fact that he was hired because of his name too? A lot of people that believed that at that point in time.
I feel like it wasn't so much that. The negative narrative was more along the lines of he got hired because he wanted the job so bad. Kind of like you can't. It was more like you can't hire the guy just because they really want the job. Yeah. Was kind of the negative, I guess, spin that you saw from some people. I was trying to think of other ones that were obvious. Tom Herman, I thought was, this is the up and coming best offensive mind in football. He gets hired at Texas. This is going to work out perfectly. It did not.
When Mark Richt and Georgia parted ways at the end of 2015, I and many people were in the Tom Herman camp of, hey, get this guy to Georgia. This is going to be the guy that takes the team to the next level. Obviously, he went to Texas.
You were wrong, Tyler.
I was wrong. I was happy I was wrong, but I was very wrong. And now, I was not opposed to the Kirby hire because, again, that was kind of the two names that were getting floated out there. But I was like, I just feel like Tom Herman would be the right guy. I was wrong.
Well, as legend tells it, the South Carolina opening was the reason why Georgia even had an opening.
I heard that as well.
Because Tom Herman, this was back when Carolina hired Muschamp, obviously, not Shane Beamer, but Tom Herman was target one. Mm-hmm. Kirby Smart was target two. And then allegedly, when Carolina moves on to Kirby Smart, and it was always said that Ray Tanner really thought incredibly highly of Kirby Smart. And I would say Kirby Smart was kind of always the favorite to end up at Carolina until Tom Herman became the shiny new object.
Okay.
So then Tom Herman was one, but Kirby Smart was always kind of right there. And the thought process was, oh, he's a coordinator right now. you can always go get him. And
okay.
So Herman first, right?
Yep.
I would love to be a fly on the wall to know exactly how close it ever got with Kirby.
Yeah.
But allegedly it got very close. And Georgia got told, hey, if you're ever going to hire Kirby Smart as your coach, you have to have an opening right now.
Yeah, they parted ways with Rick the day after the Tech game, and the rest is history. But I have heard it was very close to happening here.
Yes.
So, interesting. But again, credit to Marcus Freeman, obviously winning the Bear Bryant Coach of the Year award, and again, Coach Beamer in the running for that last night with several of the guys that were in the college football playoff. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Take a look at the AP poll that came out the other day and see how it stacks up to the one that came out in the preseason. What did they get right and what did they get really, really wrong? That's coming up next here on your Thursday. Tyler and Wes here on The Game.
All right, guys, let me tell you about our friends over at Classic Roofing. Tell you about them every day, just about. ClassicRoofingSC.com is the website. 803-590-7870 is the phone number. If you head on over to that website, look at the top right-hand side of your screen there. You're going to see a free estimate button. You may be saying, why do I need a free estimate right now? I don't have any issues with my roof. Well, for one, you want to go ahead and cut off those issues before they happen. Maybe there's some small things that you have not noticed that you can go ahead and take care of now. Also, you want to know how much life do I have on my roof? Of course, that's going to be a big undertaking that can, when you actually make that move to get a new roof. However, if you go ahead and plan for that, if you have an idea for how much life is left on your roof, you're going to be able to go ahead and be ready for that when that time comes. So, again, hit up our friends at Classic Roofing. That's ClassicRoofingSC.com, 803-590-7870.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler and Wes along with you here on your Thursday on the game. We'll get back into men's basketball coming up at the top of the hour with Chris. The Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. By the way, I know we were supposed to be out at Firehouse these past couple days on Forest Drive. That's been moved to next Tuesday. That is our plan as of right now. Obviously, with the weather and the snow and ice and all that kind of stuff, didn't want to put anybody in harm's way there. So next week, we are planning to be out at Firehouse Subs on Forest Drive. So come by and see us then. As we are wrapping up the college football season, of course, Ohio State winning the national championship on Monday. We did have the AP poll that came out the other day and talked about it a little bit. Carolina being at 19 obviously makes sense. Ohio State's 1, Notre Dame's at 2. But I was kind of go back and looking yesterday compared to the preseason poll. And again, look, the AP poll, I hold no value in it. It's just something that gives us things to talk about before the college football playoff poll comes out, though it can have an effect on the playoff poll, especially the first couple based on where teams are at in the AP poll. But looking back at the top 25 before the season, it's actually pretty interesting to see where everybody was and where they ended up. And if I did my counting correctly, I believe they got 13 of the 25 teams right. They got 8 of the 12 teams in the college football playoff in the initial top 25. But it's really funny looking back when you see teams like Michigan at 9, Florida State at 11, Utah at 12, the ones that, and again, you thought they were going to have strong seasons that just went completely sideways. Even LSU at a 13 to a degree compared to what we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and I mean, with Michigan, they're coming off a national championship. So you're not going to, like, I understand it's a completely different team, different coach, different quarterback.
Sure.
How far back should they? I mean, they're not going to put Michigan outside of the top 25.
No, and I think we all looked at that one like, okay, you're giving them the champions discount by saying,
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
We know this team's not likely going to be the 9th best team, but from an optics standpoint, we can't put the defending national champions outside of that. And here's the thing. They ended very strongly. They beat Michigan and Ohio State and Alabama in their last 2 games of the year to end up with 9 wins, I think, 7 or 8 wins, something like that. So they ended very strongly, but it was an up and down year. They couldn't find offense. Their quarterbacks couldn't throw the ball to save their lives. So it wasn't a great year by any means, but yeah, very much a champion's discount when it comes to being at number 9. And Florida State, look, we were all very wrong about what this team is going to be. I think we all looked at it and said there's got to be, not necessarily maybe thinking they're going to go undefeated again and, be a shoo-in for the college ball playoff, but I was thinking 8, 9, 10 wins, somewhere around there would be respectable, but 2-10, nobody saw that coming.
Yeah, I mean, you can, to me, the Michigan one, like you said, champions discount. They ended up being a pretty good team by the end. No issues. Florida State is the one where it just completely unraveled for them. And I mean, I remember watching preseason that opening game in Dublin against Georgia Tech, and they had all been at the Florida State practice, and even Nick Saban is sitting there going, yeah, they lost a lot of talent, but the ability on this Florida State defensive line to cause havoc is going to be a difference maker for them this year. And we all thought this was an incredible win for Georgia Tech, and what we didn't realize was it was really more, and Georgia Tech ended up being actually pretty good too, but it was more about Florida State than anything. And so I do think, but hey, here's the thing though, Tyler, if people before the year, like, there's this thing in college football, we all kind of go along with the wave a little bit of what people are saying.
Sure.
If you had come out and just said, if you were a national media person and you said, guys, I don't see it with Florida State. I don't even know if they're going to go to a bowl. Do you know how many people would have said you're an absolute idiot?
Oh, totally.
Like, and that, so even with Carolina, we see it to an extent. Carolina has had 5 wins the previous year. If you said, I think Carolina's going to win 9 games, go to a good bowl game, and be on the verge of the college football playoff, well, you're a homer. That's a terrible prediction. Did you see what happened last year? Mm-hmm. Just like I've already seen some people say that if you think Carolina next year will win 7 or 8 games as opposed to taking another step forward, oh, wow, that's negative. No, dude. One year does not, especially now, 1 year does not guarantee you're going to be successful next year, and it doesn't guarantee you're going to stink next year. Like, it is a complete, like, a lot of these teams are completely different teams from year to year.
And I think because we're still very young into the NIL and transfer portal era where you have so much roster turnover, I think we still think in that mindset of, 5, 10, 20 years ago where your rosters are pretty much the same year over year unless you just have a bunch of seniors graduate or something like that, where the swings in teams year to year wasn't nearly what it is now, where, again, you go out there and you hit the portal, right? You get a good recruiting class in, and boom, you could go from being a 4-win team to a 10, 11-win team just like that. And I just don't think we're quite up to expecting that as much now.
Yeah, and we're still all very reactionary, I think.
Sure.
Like,
that's our job. That's what we do.
Well, that happened last time, so it's going to happen again. That's not how it works. But for the most part, I mean, the preseason list wasn't that bad, at least at the
terrible.
top. I mean, even Ole Miss at 6, I still think Ole Miss was the most talented team that did not make the playoff overall, pure talent.
Yep.
So
that'll do it for the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs coming up next here on your Thursday on the Game.
all right, friends, almost lunchtime. Go ahead and make that order for our friends over at Firehouse Subs. That's firehousesubs.com, or get the Firehouse Subs app. Hopefully you already have it. If you don't, get it now. Hit the Rapid Rescue to go. Avoid the wait. Order online. They're going to have a wonderful sub and the side waiting for you there in the bag right when you walk in. We have, as Tyler said, moved our live show for Firehouse from this week to next week, so make sure you come check us out at the Forest Drive location next Tuesday, and come try the new French dip with premium cut roast beef. It's on a garlic bread roll. It's got the au jus on the side. It's fantastic. What else is fantastic? The hot sauce bar, which is back. Those of you who remember back in the day, all those different hot sauce options that you could have for any of your sandwiches, it is back. Add some flavor to any sub when you dine in or pick up. Again, we want to see you out there Tuesday, Forest Drive location, Firehouse Subs.
11 o'clock on your Thursday morning. Welcome in. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris along with you here on The Game. Got everybody back in studio today now that the weather is clearing out. The snow is melting. Still cold outside. I can't decide what's colder, the weather outside or the feeling fans would have had walking out of Colonial Life Arena last night. We've been talking about it all morning long. Men's basketball drops to 0-6 in conference play with the 70-69 loss to number 5 Florida, a game they led up until those final 5 seconds. And Chris, West, and I kind of gave our thoughts in last hour. Your perspective on what went down last night?
I mean, I was a little bit late getting the game on and had something going on. Got a couple of texts saying, hey, check out the game. And so I turned it on, and I even made a joke to my wife. I'm going, hey, look, we turned this game on. It's probably going to go the other direction. I have kind of a hex when I watch Gamecock basketball, so I apologize. But I turn it on, and, you know, they're still up, but you just get the sense, okay, Florida's tightened this thing down a little bit. There were a couple points in the game where it looked like in the second half, obviously South Carolina played well in the first half. They built themselves a cushion. There are a couple points where like, okay, did South Carolina maybe actually put this thing away? But again, it was turnovers, right? And not just at the end of the game. There are obviously the end of game situations. South Carolina turns the ball over. But it was even kind of in the middle of the second half. Mm-hmm. You had some issues with turning the ball over a couple straight times, you know, and leading to baskets for Florida. So, you know, it's incredibly frustrating, I'm sure, for this team. It's incredibly frustrating for the fan base because not just this game, but a couple other games this season. You know, the Auburn game. You think about the Vandy game, where you're not just in striking distance. Like you have, it looks like you have an opportunity to have the game won, and you just can't get it done. And so there's a big difference in having 3 conference wins, or 1 or 2, and 0, which is where they're at right now.
Yeah, and we played the cut from Coach Paris, kind of talking about what's next. I mean, you still got to play 12 more games. Your chances of making the tournament are pretty minuscule. You're 1 game above 500 right now after you ended non-conference play at 10-3. You're going to have to play these games regardless, and you wonder what the motivating factor is going forward. Again, you've played well enough to beat 2 top 5 teams. You should have beaten Vanderbilt despite turning the ball over 25 times in that game. You're doing a lot of things right, but when it comes down to crunch time in those critical moments, and I'll bring up the stat once again, 9 turnovers in the final 9 minutes in yesterday's game. Like, those are what kill you. Missing free throws, that's what kills you. That reared its ugly head with, again, Zach Davis the chance to make it a 2-point game as opposed to a 1-point game there in the last couple seconds. Ends up missing one of the free throws. Like, it's just these things constantly coming up. And, you know, when it happens once or twice, when it happens like once in a game, that's an anomaly. When it's happening every single game, that's just who you are, and that's what the identity of your team becomes.
Well, and Chris, we talked about this before we got into here, man, but I think the most frustrating thing about this team is that if they were just bad, you just be like, well, they're just bad. And if you're a fan, frankly, there's a certain segment of the, you know, you just turn it off. You're like, well, they're just not good. Mm-hmm. If you look at the record, if you not watch South Carolina play at all, you might just be like, oh, it's a very good team this year. But watching the games, it's very clear that there is talent on this team. Like, you would not be able to create these leads against top 5 teams if you did not have some ability.
Yeah.
So I think that's the most frustrating part for everyone is trying to find, all right, why is this happening? What can be done to fix it? How can a team that is able to these are not flukes. If you get a lead on a team that no one expects you to beat and it happens once, to Tyler's point, that also could just be, well, hey, that other team had a bad day and you had a great day. Mm-hmm. In Carolina's stance, you've had leads, and you've had big leads to an extent in multiple of these SEC games, 2 of which are against top 5 teams, a couple other ones. You know, even the Oklahoma game, you look at the final score, you're like, Carolina got boat raced. You watch that game? No, Carolina has a lead in that game too. So it's like, where's the disconnect between the final result and what is happening on the court? Because I don't feel like you expect a team that does have the talent they have to struggle so much with things like turnovers. So,
Yeah.
I mean, is it as simple as it just goes back to overall guard play, and you're missing, for one, you had some questions there anyway, replacing Talon Cooper, and now you lose your lead guard, your guy that you brought in as a transfer. Is it overall depth? I think that's part of it, especially with the injuries. I think the depth is a big issue, but I don't know, man. It's just I understand the fans' frustration because you are right there with a chance to win so many of these games.
Yeah, and that's the thing that struck me last night watching the game, and this isn't some amazing revelation, but the thought that came into my head was just they don't know how. And when I say know how, it's not like they don't know what to do. They just have not executed what it takes to close out games, And like the Oklahoma game, Wes, like you look at that box score, you go, oh, that wasn't even a competitive game. It was definitely competitive for a great stretch of the game, and then the wheels fell off. You've got other games where, when did the wheels start falling off? 8 minutes left, 5 minutes left against Oklahoma, something like that. It's a 35-15 run by Oklahoma.
They were tied at 47 with about 12 to go.
The other games, it's been like, it's been the final minute with some key plays, but I think it's also been, you could wind the clock back, and it's some plays that they didn't make in the second half that could have put it away, right? Remember, there was a Zach Davis dunk last night, and you're going, okay, was that the nail in the coffin? But no, then you turn it over 2 straight times to the same guy, and it leads to points. It's those kind of plays that make it to where when you get to that final minute, can you build up enough cushion to where you're not relying on we've got to make the perfect play here. But then you've also seen some plays like we saw last night. You're inbounding the basketball late in the game, and you just make a bounce pass that's not the best pass, and the guy reaches around, and now there's a steal, and then there's a basket, right? So I think it's just been a combination. And to your point, Wes, like, what is it? Why is it? Well, you can't say that this team is incredibly inexperienced. Do they have some guys that, Arden Conyers is a young player. CMB's a second-year player, but he's really good. He's their best player. You've got guys that have played a lot of basketball. I think just for whatever reason, down the stretch, there's probably a variety of reasons, the execution has failed, yes, very late in the game, but also, again, to go back to my point, I think you look at some of the other plays in the second half to where you've got a cushion. Can you keep your foot on the gas? Can you just keep making plays? And I do think they miss Cooper from that standpoint. I think they miss not having Jamari Thomas and not having Miles Studi, because those are guys that you can, if you get in a pinch, you can put in the game. If you need to switch things up, if something's not working, if you start to sense that things are going sideways on you, you can change your lineup. You don't have as much flexibility now. But certainly Cooper, I think we all talked about that going into the season. Who will they miss the most out of the guys that they missed? I think it's Cooper, just because of that effect that he had on the offense of being kind of almost in total control of things.
And Wes and I talked about this in the last hour, again, with Jamari Thomas being out and potentially being able to come out next week, you don't have any effective point guard. You got multiple guys trying to do it, but nobody doing it effectively enough. When you don't have that guy that can be the quarterback of your offense, you obviously see the effect. Now, again, the defense is playing well enough to keep them in this games, but again, like you said, when the wheels come off, it just completely goes off the rails, and you saw it slowly start in the second half when it came to those turnovers. Again, give them credit. They didn't turn the ball over for the first 11 minutes of the game last night, which, given the last couple games, was nothing short of a minor miracle. But, man, when they started happening in the second half, they just kept coming, and again, led to that very end sequence where, Florida's just grabbing it, time and time again and getting bucket after bucket after bucket and closing the gap.
Yeah, and some of that, obviously, you give credit to Florida for going to a full court defense there and putting you in a spot where Carolina just did not look comfortable. And kind of speaking to some of the points y'all have made, Carolina, I feel like, just lost their aggressiveness. And, I'm not saying you want to go jack up a shot 5 seconds into the shot clock when you have a lead, but I think there's a difference between continuing to be aggressive and look for your shot versus just, hey, let's run the clock out. And it just felt like some of that edge, some of that aggressiveness, some of that looseness that they were playing with really for almost the entire game was not there down the stretch. I was going, hey, get the ball down the floor. Like there were times when Florida is going full court, they're trying to trap you, and Carolina was almost inviting it by not aggressively getting the ball up the floor. And so I don't know. It felt like I said earlier, it felt like you were watching the result in slow motion, as that you could watch the time tick away, but the lead got smaller and smaller and smaller. You watched as more issues started to pop up, more mistakes popped up, and it just snowballed for them. And, I was thinking, all right, this might be the time they at least are able to hold on this time, but that obviously did not end up being the case. And I do feel for the guys, because they are trying. They're putting forth effort. A lot of guys right now, for various reasons, a lot of it because the injuries, are being asked to do things that maybe aren't necessarily directly in their wheelhouse, and you can see the results.
Yeah, and I think you also got to remember Florida's a really good team. Auburn's a really good team. And so if you leave openings for them, they're going to take it. This Florida team, I mean, guys, there have been some really, really good Florida teams in the past, national championship teams. Last night with that win, they tied the best 19-game start in program history. And so when you've got an opportunity to put not just any team, a good team away like that, you've got to do it. So I go back to earlier with, 8 minutes left in the game, 7 minutes left in the game. Don't leave it to where, you can't turn the ball over in the last minute. Obviously, you don't want to, but you got to leave yourself some wiggle room, because this is a team that has had too many of those key turnovers and key plays. Florida, they run a set out of a timeout. They get an open three from the corner. They make it, right? They make some one-on-one plays. That's what they do. They're a really good basketball team. So you got to not leave that much. You can't have it that tight late in the game. And if you do, when you've had opportunities to put it away, and when you do, you got to be able to make those key plays, not turn the ball over so late. So we'll see, especially when they get Thomas back, how much does that change the equation? We'll see, but a frustrating start for sure.
Well, we'll let you hear a little bit more from what Lamont Paris had to say after the game last night. Coming up next is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Rolls along on your Thursday here on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris along with you on your Thursday. It is time to flip the card over and check the stats. Brought to you by our friends at Palmetto Cards in Lexington. The story of last night's game, unfortunately, once again, boiled down in a lot of ways. 2 turnovers. South Carolina turning the ball over 15 times against the Florida Gators, turning the ball over 16 times against Oklahoma, and, of course, 25 times in their loss to Vanderbilt the other week as well. This has become a consistent issue with this team. And last night after the game, Coach Paris talked about just trying to get a better handle on the basketball when they have it.
I don't know how to answer that, to be honest with you. We got the ball inbounds. That was step number one. We got the ball inbounds to perimeter players. I think that's probably how you're going to draw it up. I don't know. We have to handle it better. There's not a lot of ways to say it. You got to handle it better. I mean, we've played basketball since how long? And you have to be able to handle some pressure. And I'll look at it again. Maybe we should have, based on our turnovers in some other games, spent even more time working on that. But we do some drills where we're in traps and we're outnumbered. And we got one guy that only traps. So it's 5-on-5, and anytime a guy gets the ball, he's getting trapped by another guy every single time. And we're working on pivoting strong and being strong with the ball and stepping through and coming back to meet the ball. And, we've done that drill a bunch. But, it's the game. It's the game time. You got to play. You got to be able to find a guy or use a timeout. We had a timeout, right? We just got to handle it better.
And you can hear the frustration, obviously. And when you have a game like last night where, once again, turnovers become a problem, people are so quick to say, well, you need to start working on passing the ball better in practice, or free throws. Work on your free throws in practice. They're doing these things. Of course, it's fundamental basketball that every team around the country is doing. There's just some kind of disconnect when you get on the court in a game, especially in those last couple of minutes, last half, or last 10 or so minutes of the second half, just things come apart. And when you get this deep into the season, you don't know if you're going to be able to fix it or not, which is the frustrating part about watching this team.
Well, and Lamont there admitted that, hey, and I'm not surprised he said it. Maybe we should work on it more. It's not like they ignore these things. Like you said, Tyler, it's not they don't shoot free throws in practice. It's not, they don't work on inbounding the basketball and against pressure. But it is different to do it in a game situation. And to go back to what I said first segment, this is a tough league. And, you're going to play quality opponents who, if you're careless with the ball, they will make you pay. And so, we saw that against Florida. And, Wes, I was just telling you, during the break there, we were looking back at the game. You got less than 9 minutes to go in this game yesterday. And Zach Davis has a dunk, and you're up 13, I believe, at that point. But what happens? Careless with the basketball around midcourt. You give up 2 straight steals, 2 straight buckets, and now it's a new game. That's an opportunity to keep that lead or to pad that lead. But instead, what you do is you're careless, and then down the stretch, you're leaving it a little bit more up to chance where a play can go one way or another, and you're on the verge of, it's tough to tell if you're going to be able to win or lose in the last minute. So, I don't have the answers either. They're obviously, one of them is obvious, and that is, from a personnel standpoint, you're missing some guys. You're missing your point guard you brought in Jamari Thomas. You're missing Miles Studi, who can also handle the basketball as a perimeter player. And that does hurt in certain situations. But other than that, man, just like the timing of some of these is kind of hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah, and I think as a game gets tighter and tighter down the stretch, your mistakes are just amplified, and your small mistakes become big mistakes. And I think a lot of it is you kind of look at these things from a fundamental standpoint on some of the turnovers. It is just being a a little bit careless with the ball on. Like, you hate to just, like, is it that simple? Probably not, but to a certain degree, it kind of is. And I feel like it's kind of on both ends. Like, if you look at a situation where you have a pass get, picked off or something. Sometimes, yeah, it's just, hey, you made a bad pass. But to me, a lot of times, and you kind of maybe see guys kind of throwing up their hands like, hey, what happened there? It's on both ends of it. It's the pass needed to be a little bit more forceful. The pass needed to be a little bit more accurate. The pass needed to be a little bit more well-placed. But then on the other end, you need the guy on the receiving end of the pass to be a little bit stronger by coming back to the basketball as well. So I think these teams like Florida, they are going to make you pay when the basketball is just a little bit sort of out there to be taken away. And we saw Carolina do the same to Florida at times. There was, I remember specifically, a rebound where it was like everybody on the court was just watching the ball, and Arden Conyers just jumped in front of everyone and snatched the ball and laid it in for what I thought at the time was a huge basket. Mm-hmm. There were times, especially, the announcers talked about it early on, where Carolina was just out hustling Florida and was just beating them to the basketball. So it's not that this team doesn't give effort. I'm not saying that. I think they lose some of their edge at the end, and it's all athletics are so mental, man. I feel like there was some just there's a mental block right now at the end of games when it starts getting tight because these issues become bigger. And then, again, I'll give credit to Florida, though, too. They switched up their strategy on defense, and it paid off. And at that point, why are you going to go away from it if it's working? You're not. I'll add, I thought – so I had two swings mentally. When Florida hit their bank three-pointer, I was like, oh, God, game's over. Florida's going to win this game. And then when Carolina, Zachary Davis, when they had a terrible offensive possession. Yeah. And he throws up a prayer, and it banks and goes in. I was like, oh, Carolina's going to win this game. Mm-hmm. It was a strange game. But when you leave it up to chance, the funny thing about that shot, too, you could tell the guys on the bench were, like, grinning, but they were even kind of, like tensed up, like, what just happened? Like, that was not supposed to even go. The basketball gods normally do not reward that.
That bad possession, yeah. Yeah, just leaving it up to – I don't want to say – I probably said chance earlier as well, but, it's more leaving it up to your margin of error is so low in that game against, again, a really quality opponent. You're going to have more of those situations. This is a Gamecock basketball team that has opened up leads, and not just, hey, they're up by one or two. They've opened up some double-digit leads on teams just like they did last night. Can you keep your foot on the gas, or can you just kind of use that cushion and not immediately walk it back by making these critical mistakes to where when you get in the final minute you can make a play? If they get in those situations in the future, which, again, they've shown they're capable, can they do that? On the other hand, Wes, you are going to have games, because we've seen them several times, against this schedule in this league where it does come down to the final minute. And so when you put yourself in those situations, can you be a little bit better with the basketball, or what we should say, be a lot better with it, to where you're not having those critical turnovers? There were several opportunities in that game Carolina could win. There was Colin Murray-Boyles went up in traffic, one-hand man rebound. And that was a point for me late in the game where I went, all right, Florida missed, got a good look, missed. Colin came down with this rebound, and you feel good at that point. But they just didn't make the plays down the stretch. Some of them routine plays. Get the ball in bounds without turning the ball over. Yep. Those are the things that you have to do.
Next game up is against another top 15 team in Mississippi State. Of course, the team that beat South Carolina by 35 to open up conference play a few weeks ago. But again, Carolina does play better at home, so we'll see what happens on Saturday as they take on the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Yesterday, the ratings for Monday night's college football playoff national championship game come out, and they took a little bit of a dip from a year ago. What does that mean? We'll discuss it coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Thursday here on The Game.
Just heard about our friends over at Pro Swing, and that is, of course, operated by our guy Michael and Nathan, our guys Michael and Nathan over at Integrated Media. So if you're over in Chapin at Pro Swing, the shop right next door to them is Integrated Media. You can go check out their experience room there. Any of your home or business audiovisual needs, they can help you out with them. 803-948-8327. Check out their website at integratedmediainc.com. I've trusted them to come out to my home, so as Wes. They can take care of any projects that you may need, anything from, hey, I need to pick out a new TV. I need to mount my new TV. I don't have time. I don't have the knowledge. I want a professional group to do it. They can do all of that for you. They can do that, but they can also do complete smart home systems in your home so that you can control your lights, devices, thermostats, all your security and cameras from the touch of a button on your smartphone. IntegratedMediaInc.com or 803-948-8327.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West Chris along with you on this Thursday. Reminder again, today from 3 until 6, the post-game road show thanks to Schroeder's Towing is going to be out at Craft and Draft at 7583 St. Andrews Road out in Irmo. So go by and see Jay and Elijah today. And immediately following that, you're going to have Carolina Calls with Coach Lamont Paris right here on the Game in Columbia, as well as 100.3 The Game out in Myrtle Beach. Yesterday, the television ratings for Monday night's national championship game were released. The Buckeyes and Fighting Irish averaged 22.1 million viewers for Monday night's game, down quite a bit, actually, from last year's national championship game between Washington and Michigan, which averaged 25.05. And when you look at the history of the college football playoff, out of the 11 national championship games, that one last Monday comes in at 9th overall when it comes to TV ratings. Only the COVID year one between Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia TCU a couple years ago had a lower overall rating.
Somewhat slightly surprised by this because you did have two national brands. And a lot of times, I've always thought that leads to greater viewership, even though people maybe say they don't want to see those brands or they complain about it. The numbers typically say otherwise. So a little bit surprised in terms of that, but we did talk about it on Monday. I do think college football has a little bit of a problem in terms of when the game is played, how far after the season it's played, and how just stretched out the college football playoff is. Because I feel like by then, aren't you? Now, unless you're an Ohio State or Notre Dame fan, like if it wasn't these two teams, I bet it would be a scary low number.
Probably,
because if you're not one of those teams, it's so even before the game, looking at it from a South Carolina standpoint, if I'm writing about Carolina, I'm already saying last season. I'm not saying this season anymore.
Yeah.
I'm saying last season. So by the time you actually play the college football playoff, most of your college football fans, like the heartbeat of this thing, they've been reading about the transfer portal and are already looking forward to watching, this transfer quarterback's coming in, this transfer running back's coming in. Their focus is on what can I do next year. Mm-hmm. Their focus isn't even on what's going on this year. So I think you add in, and I don't think this is everybody, you add in the NFL. I know there's a lot of people that are more, I'm a college football fan. So, but there's a reason why the NFL is almost always the most watched thing on TV. Like that can't be denied here. So when you start to, I know you're not competing with the NFL on that exact day, but you're competing with the NFL just in terms of interest. You're competing with the NFL in terms of what the national podcast or ESPN shows are talking about, and you're just competing with the NFL in terms of where the collective sports world's mind is at right now. So I think it shouldn't be on a Monday. It shouldn't be so late. And I think if the college football playoff had been a little bit more entertaining along the way, we would have been a little bit more hyped up for this thing on Monday as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the Georgia TCU game. I mean, that was being one of the lowest ranked national title games. And I would imagine that was because, you get your peaks and your valleys and viewership. Probably one reason that was an absolute stinker.
Yeah, I think a lot of people tuned out pretty quickly on that one.
I mean, first of all, and no disrespect to TCU, they made the national title game that year, but that's not one of the bigger brands, in college football. And maybe people were excited to see, okay, can they compete? They very quickly found out, no, they can't. And
sure.
So, then you turn the game off. So this one was more compelling, but I think you make several good points, Wes. I mean, number one, there were a few games throughout the college football playoff that weren't incredibly exciting, but the NFL, not just head-to-head, but in terms of the interest at the end of the year, and this thing is stretched out pretty far. I mean, we're way into January by the time you play the national title game. So is that something that's looked at for the future? Maybe so. I mean, there's some shorter term things that are being discussed in terms of changes as soon as next year. A lot of the changes that are being discussed are more long term, but working with the NFL, and that can be direct, making sure you're avoiding the head-to-head, maybe integrating those, making them into big just football days like Wes brought up on the show yesterday. Maybe that's part of it, but also just how can you keep more interest on the sport? And the NFL is just a juggernaut, you know? I mean, it always has been. It's extremely difficult to go head-to-head. It's extremely difficult to go up against them just in the prime of the NFL season. They always draw heavy ratings. It's always very interesting to go into a city that either doesn't have a college football team, or if they have one, it's just kind of meh, you know. I had a Clemson fan recently. One of my neighbors, a big Clemson fan, and was saying when they went to California for the national title game, people were like, several years ago, who are y'all? What's going on here?
Yeah,
right?
why are you here?
Why are you here? They're like, the football game. Which one? Who's that? You know, the national title game for college football. Oh, you know, so in those cities, I mean, it's just, they're so NFL, and it's really interesting to be in more of a college town, just a completely different mindset.
I think it's also important to look at, kind of comparing this to what happened a couple years ago with Georgia and TCU, where I don't think anybody viewed TCU as a legitimate threat to that Georgia team. Again, anything can happen in a game, and upsets can happen, but I think everyone said if Georgia plays the game we expected to play, it shouldn't be any much of a contest, and it wasn't. And in this game, the conversation going into it was, yes, Notre Dame had earned their way to that game, but most people said, well, Ohio State's been blowing everybody out. They're the most talented team in the entire country. They're most likely going to win this game. So to appeal to that, because again, we're college football freaks. We're going to watch the game no matter what because it's what we do. But those fringe people, those casual viewers, the people that kind of in and out or maybe have tuned out for the rest of the college football season because their team's done playing, if they see a game they don't think is going to be very competitive, they're probably not inclined to watch it. And maybe you watch for a few minutes, say, oh, well, Ohio State's up 21-7. Going to go ahead and tune out now because this is exactly what I thought. So I think the potential of it, a compelling matchup, draws more people in too. And this one, I don't think quite checked that box.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I mean, I don't even know for this season what could have been a more compelling matchup. Honestly, on paper, maybe it said it was structured to where, I mean, would have an Oregon-Ohio State rematch have gotten more eyeballs at that point?
Maybe.
I mean, I think, frankly, it kind of hurt a little bit that the SEC's representatives were down a little bit. Like, in reality, you kind of would have loved, I'm sure, TV-wise, to be able to play the Big Ten versus SEC angle. If Georgia had been, if Georgia had gotten quarterback play this year like we thought they would, then, a Georgia-Ohio State matchup in the national championship, just from like a big brand and casual fan standpoint, actually probably would have been your best scenario, but obviously that did not happen. Other than that, I don't even know. I mean, Ohio State and Notre Dame, those are two pretty big brands. It's just a matter of, at this point, Ohio State was playing so well down the stretch of at least in the college football playoff. I don't want to say down the stretch of the season because we saw it happen with Michigan, but it was almost like it was kind of anticlimactic, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, again, it's still $22.1 million. That's a lot. I love how they spin all the positives to these kind of things. It was the most viewed non-NFL sporting event over the past year, which doesn't count last year's national championship. Most watched game of the inaugural 12-team playoff. Okay, that makes sense. The national championship. More than half of the audience of 18 to 49 were tuned in to this game, and it peaked at 26.1 between 8:30 and 8:45. And again, this is from ESPN PR. They're going to spin this any way that they can, but it is.
I mean, it's still a big number.
It's still a big number. And you can't say, well, it's because the SEC wasn't in it, because you had two non-SEC teams last year go 3 million more people as an average in that game. So there's a lot baked into this, but I'm intrigued, especially now that we're playing it so much later, like you brought up, how these numbers may change as the years goes along if we continue to do it like this.
Yeah, we'll see. It's a big number, but it can be bigger, and I think that's by not necessarily. I don't think it's by blowing the whole thing up. I think it's about making some tweaks along the way.
Sensible solutions. We'll see if they can get there. We'll come back and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. An interesting little wrinkle potentially coming to the revenue sharing in college football or college sports in general involving Title IX. We'll touch on that coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour here on your Thursday on the Game. Well, welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris, along with you here on your Thursday on the Game. It is a story you've been meaning to get to for a couple days. Haven't had the opportunity to do that, but Chris, you really wanted to bring this up. The other day, the Department of Education sent out a memo to the universities in reference to Title IX and its potential impact on this upcoming revenue sharing, which, again, we still don't know exactly how all this is going to work yet. All the things have to be finalized with the courts and all that kind of stuff. They're hoping to get that done, I believe, by April, but a lot's still up in the air on the enforcement and the specifics of this. And one thing that the Department of Education pointed out was that it seems that the revenue share within the school still falls under the Title IX distribution, where you have to have basically a equal share given to the female athletes at a school compared to the male athletes, which, again, I know a lot of schools were kind of planning on saying, okay, we're going to take all this lump sum of money and put as much towards football as we can, because that's obviously our cash cow sport, but this could potentially cause a little bit of a bump in the road with that. Everybody
is really counting on revenue share to go into effect in the way that it's been proposed, right? So right now, to back up, in case you haven't heard or if you need a refresher, House versus NCAA, big case in the courts. And that's kind of, there are other lawsuits that are kind of attached to it. There are new ones being filed on a regular basis. But there is a proposed settlement right now that needs to be signed off with finality. And if that happened in July, schools could start revenue sharing with athletes. And so many people are counting on this as kind of a fix in some ways for some of the issues that are facing college athletics. And we've heard about a lot of schools or collectives signing athletes to these rev share contracts, meaning, hey, you're going to get paid this, but it all assumes revenue sharing. Not everybody's doing that, to be clear, but it has happened. But, of course, one of the components of revenue sharing is, okay, if you're a school and you're getting to this $22 million cap, how are you going to distribute the money? And like you said, Tyler, football, I mean, it is what it is. Football drives most revenue at schools. And so from that standpoint, schools are devoting an outsized, or you could say proportional, portion of revenue sharing to that. But then Title IX comes into effect. And so that is one of the questions, one of several questions, as this settlement, as we all wait to see if this settlement is going to get approved. Now, of course, with the Department of Education saying, hey, those dollars are going to be subject to Title IX, another question is, and we're not going to get political here, of course, but that is a government entity.
Yep.
And so we've got a transition right now in the government that has happened. Will that line of thinking even remain the same? So just a lot of questions here that we still have to get answered.
And quickly to clarify, current NIL right now does not fall under Title IX because it's being done outside of the university. So the money that comes in from the Garnet Trust, that does not have to be proportionally split between the men and the women, because, again, it's outside the university. But, again, when you're talking about schools directly paying players, that's where this gets really murky.
And some people are trying to say even collective dollars would be subject to Title IX. So there's just a lot of questions.
We thought we were getting some structure.
We thought.
And it appears what we thought the structure was going to be, at least according to this guidance, is far different. I'll be very curious to see what sticks and what doesn't. If it is a revenue share, to Chris's point earlier, what is a proportionate revenue share to what each sport is actually bringing in? Does that factor into this? I thought this was, at least at the time, fascinating, just to give people an idea. Not everybody is going to even, I imagine, put out what their distribution percentages would be. There was talk, I believe, that the SEC would maybe say, hey, all of our schools are going to be under a similar, or if not the same structure. Texas Tech was one of the only schools I saw where this just became public information. And so for people who are curious, of a projected $20.5 million, they had 15.1 going to football. That's 74%. 3.6 mil going to men's basketball. That's 17.5%. 410,000 going to women's basketball. That's 2%. 390,000, which is 1.9%, going to baseball. All other sports, $920,000, which is 4.5%. Obviously, if Title IX is in play, then those percentages are completely thrown out the window, right?
Yeah. And so, we don't really have the answers to much of this. And I think what is clear is we have gotten where we are right now, which there's some good and some bad, of course, on all sides with all this. We've gotten here via litigation, and it's been NCAA gets sued. NCAA then comes along and says, actually, we just updated our guidelines.
Weird how that works.
Constantly. We cannot continue running college athletics on the backs of litigation. We can't do it through the courts. We've got to have some kind of structure, like you said, Wes, of whether it's collective bargaining or some other type of structure where both sides come together. Both sides are going to have to make some concessions, and then we're going to have somewhat of a structure to where it's not make a rule, get sued, change rule. That's not sustainable.
It's a never-ending cycle, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show, myself, Terry Ford. Up next, Reset Men's Basketball here on The Game.
All right, y'all have heard about our friends over at Firehouse Subs on a daily basis since we started the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Shout out to our guy, Larry Chandler, owner and operator of all 15 Midlands Firehouse Subs locations. Again, one of my favorite things about Firehouse Subs. Absolutely love their food, love the convenience and being able to order with the Rapid Rescue to go online or on the app, firehousesubs.com, or download the app for free. But that's one of the great things about it is because no matter where you are in the Midlands, there's going to be a Firehouse Subs close to you. 15 locations all around the Midlands. Firehousesubs.com or the app. All of your Firehouse Subs favorites are available using the Rapid Rescue to go. You can avoid the wait. Order online. Be waiting on you when you get to the store. Make sure you check out the new limited time French dip sandwich, premium cut roast beef, all on the toasted sub roll with the au jus sauce, caramelized onions, 2 different kinds of cheeses. Firehousesubs.com or download the Firehouse Subs app. Come see us Tuesday at the Forest Drive location.